that's unusual in itself. Our sense of community by most standards is unparalleled. And from my perspective, our close-knit association is practically unprecedented. Many of our relationships are over 50 years old.
Yes, sir.
We rarely see one another, but when we do, it's as though we've not been apart at all.
That's right.
This exceptional group of people spans the globe, and yet we are more like family than friends. In many ways, we are dissimilar, but our common bond eclipses our idiosyncratic differences.
Yes, yes.
Time and distance have not taken a toll on our relationship, and that is an exceptional phenomenon. Years ago, I considered taking early retirement. Times were good, and that option seemed realistic. And so that summer, my family and I went through several southern states trying to figure out an alternative to this deep freeze. And almost everywhere we went, I discovered I knew somebody.
Yes, sir.
And after a while, the kids said, "Dad, every town we've been in, you know somebody. How do you know so many people?" And I tried to explain this right here. One evening, we pulled into Cookeville, Tennessee. They said, "Who do you know in this town?" I said, "This one, I don't know anybody." We drove down the street, and there was the Church of the Nazarene just dismissing VBS. And I've been interviewing residents in various communities. Why do you live here? Why do you like this? You know, should I retire here? I pulled into the parking lot and started talking to some of the workers while they were loading the kids on the bus. And one lady said, "You need to meet our pastor." I said, "Okay." And out came Dale Bailey. He was like old times. My kids said, "Dad, I can't believe it. You really do know people everywhere." We're not only a social anomaly, we are a spiritual exception.
Thank God.
We are characterized by love and acceptance.
Yes, amen.
Many among us have earned the distinguished spiritual Purple Heart for wounds received in the house of friends. But one day, some said, "We can't do this anymore." And they bid farewell to the churches where the wounded were executed. And a new association was formed. It wasn't really intentional. It wasn't altogether on purpose. But we don't shoot our wounded, and we wanted to find a way to help people get back up on their feet and find meaningful life.
Hallelujah.
Over time, others, when they realized that the gospel message was being crippled by extra-biblical mandates, decided to come on board. And ultimately, to be intellectually honest, we all felt compelled by conscience to build a spiritual home where those who needed grace could find it. Looking back, that was not a mistake.
Thank God.
Even buying this ground wasn't a mistake.
Amen.
Frank was right. I was wrong. We've a long ways to go, but we're actually making some progress. The salt is getting out of the shaker, and our flickering lights are dispelling a measure of the darkness with which we are surrounded. What is it that created this lasting bond and restructured our spiritual philosophy? What is responsible for our cohesiveness and our camaraderie? What motivates us to realize that periodically we need to get together? What spawns our compassion for hurting people? What is it within us that insists that truth must be presented with love and understanding? What makes us such renegades in the eyes of our former church connections? What makes us who we are today? In a word, it's grace.
Yes.
There wasn't a memo sent out, but you would think there was. This service started out with songs about grace. Most of us cannot remember the first time we heard the word grace. It's not a new idea. It's not a new word in our vocabulary. We've heard about it all of our lives. We've heard tons of homilies on the subject. But when grace is not properly understood, some very confusing conclusions are drawn with regard to it. When grace is not fully reciprocated to other people, it is of little effect. And in spite of the strong rhetoric and fiery sermons on the subject, some of the loudest voices put limits on grace. I'm convinced that what we've learned about grace not only distinguishes us from our past associations, it provides for us a solid foundation for our unbroken fellowship.
Amen.
The Old Testament said, Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. I am fairly certain that his comprehension of just exactly what that meant was incredibly incomplete until the day the waters receded and he gathered his family for devotions. Only when he realized that grace was the single reason his family circle was complete could he, in spite of the judgment of God on the wicked world, fully appreciate grace. Grace was the sole reason for their survival. What makes our association last and sets this group apart from many is that we have discovered grace in 3 dimensions. And I give you the number so you can tell where I am on the clock. At home, if I say it's 3 points, then they expect the poem they've grown. But you can keep score. You can say the man's actually making progress. We are going to have one. First, we have experienced grace. I don't mean to imply that we have a corner on it, or that in some way we have a monopoly on grace. No, not at all. Every born-again believer has experienced grace. That is our only means of salvation. Paul makes it abundantly clear in his letter to the church at Ephesus. For by grace are you saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God. So this morning I say thank God for grace. And with John Newton we sing Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. A.W. Tozer said, abounding sin is the terror of the world, but abounding grace is the hope of mankind.
Yeah.
Max Lucado said, when grace moves in, guilt moves out. So this morning I sit in judgment of no man. I think often of the wisdom of Newton's words when he said, when I get to heaven, 3 wonders I shall see. The first wonder will be to see many people whom I did not expect to see. The second wonder will be to miss the people I did expect to see. And third, the wonder that I am there myself. So today, without debate or discussion, we pause to acknowledge our debt to the sufficiency of grace. Every child has experienced grace. But that's not what makes us unique. You've done more than experience grace. You've gone beyond that. You've discovered another dimension. You have extended grace.
That's good. That's good.
This is where the distinguishable differences become obvious.
That's good.
This dimension of grace makes an indescribable contribution to the relationships we treasure in this tiny subculture of Christians that are celebrating this morning. This is what makes our relationships last.
Praise God.
Unconditional love and acceptance is but a mere dream to most people.
That's right.
But when they find it, there's something about it they just cannot completely abandon. Please indulge my personal journey this morning, but it makes my point so very clearly. I don't relish sharing the ugly and the embarrassing chapters in my life. But I believe honestly that it was providential for me to speak this morning, so that in some way I can make a corporate apology for my own failures. Some time ago, a man remarked to a friend, "Don't you think Mike's congregation ought to know about his past?" And given the tenor of the conversation, I think he was all too eager to be God's messenger. How disappointed he must have been when the man in whom he was engaging conversation said, "Oh, they already know. They know all about him." Don't you just hate it when somebody spills the beans before you have the opportunity to do it yourself? I have taken full responsibility for my actions. The truth without all the accompanying rumors is bad enough. But my life is an open book, and nothing is hidden. And I am truly sorry for the pain and the disappointment that I created for some of you. But out of that experience came a book. It took me 8 months and 285 pages to write what I learned during those dark days. When a runner stumbles, subtitled "The Pursuit of a Forgotten Ministry," may or may not ever be published, although I have signed a contract with a publisher. So I've been pretty candid about where I've been. My whole point in telling you this story is quite simple. When the news broke, my friends list fell in shambles. My phone stopped ringing, and with few exceptions, I lost contact with my church family. I lived a very lonely life. And sometime later, I decided I've got to make contact. I've got to find my old friends. I've got to reconnect. So I showed up right here. And the love and charity you showed me turned the lights of hope back on.
Praise the Lord. That's good.
And again this morning you've extended grace by allowing me to speak. In some circles I'm a marked man, and in many minds no longer suited for ministry. In their world, grace has limits.
Yes.
That you extend grace is why people keep showing up around here. It's a spiritual safe place. It's a welcoming atmosphere. That is why even those who've made bad decisions and wrong choices keep coming around.
Yes, sir.
They don't feel judged nor uncomfortable. And the ability to genuinely share the grace you've experienced and express it to others is why we are all here.
Yes, thank God.
That doesn't make you a compromiser. That simply shows that you have a commitment to present the truth with love and understanding. Your grace is on full display. Not only have you experienced grace and extended grace, but finally, you have exposed others to grace. To borrow a term from presidential candidate Joe Biden, here's the deal. In an attempt to avoid celebrating what God condemns, it is easy for us to erect a barrier rather than build a bridge.
That's right.
If Christians fail in their outreach to the prodigals, they will never come home. You see, that's why you're who you are. You lived out what you preached. Because you have grown beyond a single dimension. It will be grace in the second and third dimension that has provided the glue that made you a social anomaly and a spiritual exception.
Praise
May your grasp on grace transcend this generation. I close with this story. Tony Campolo told about attending Lorraine Hansby's play, Raisin in the Sun. It's a true story about an African-American family that received $10,000 in insurance benefits from the death of the father and husband. That insurance check, it was everything. It renewed that mother's hopes and dreams she had long cherished. It represented a chance to move her family out of Harlem. It was their opportunity to escape the ghetto life. She imagined a little home out in the country away from the grime and the crime of the big city, where she could protect and care for her little family. Her children saw that check differently. The daughter saw the money as her chance to pursue her dream of a medical career. That girl's older brother pleaded for a chance to use the money so that he and a friend could go into business together. He assured the family that his success in business would greatly contribute to the future welfare of the family and give them all a brighter day. A chance, he thought, to make something of himself. And he promised to give back freely and generously. And against that mother's better judgment, she handed her son the $10,000. Well, you can guess the rest of that story. The friend left town with the money. And the older brother, now devastated by the turn of events, returned home to share the bad news with his family. His sister could not be consoled, and she tore into him with a barrage of verbal assault. Her venom was unquenchable. But in the middle of the attack on her brother, the mother interrupted him with these words: "I thought I taught you to love him." The daughter beneath her responded, "Love him? There's nothing left to love." The mother answered calmly, "There's always something left to love. And if you ain't learned that, you ain't learned nothing." She said, "If you cried for that boy today, I don't mean for yourself and for our family and for what we lost. I mean for him, for what he's been through, and for what it's done to him. Child, when do you think it's time to love somebody the most? When they've done good and made things easy for everybody? Well, let me tell you this. You ain't done learning. Because that ain't the time at all. It's when he's at his lowest, and when he can't believe in himself. Because the world done whipped up on him. When you start measuring somebody, measure him right, child. Measure him right. Make sure you done taken into account what hills and valleys he done come through before he got where he is. That's why you are who you are. You've learned to love when it seemed like there was nothing left